In this video, we're going to learn how to populate a table using an HTML form. So far, we have made some really good progress. We have learned how to connect to a database, how to create a table, and how to populate the table using some simple PHP code. Now we are going to add more interaction with the user so that the user can input some data in a form, submit it, and add records to a table in a database. Okay, so first of all, we're gonna need to connect to our database. Okay, and then we're gonna write some code that will send the data to the database. Before we do all this, let's create our form right under that. Okay, so it's going to be a form with multiple fields. It's going to be exactly the same fields of our table. So we're going to have an ID field, first name, last name, email, and then password. Okay. So we'll create the form first, and then we'll write some PHP code to send the data to the database. Okay. So first of all, let's create our form. So we're going to use the form tag. So we're going to be running the form in the same PHP script. Okay, so we don't have to specify the action, but if you want to do so, we can say action is the name of our file, which is 5.populate populate table using form. Okay, .php, and then the method is going to be post, since we are sending a password with the form. Anyway, this is just an example. So now let's have the ID inputs. So we're going to place everything inside a form group. Okay. Or div of class form group. And the input is going to be of type okay, I'm going to choose number format. Okay, and we're going to give it an ID. And also a placeholder ID, and a class form control. Okay, and then for PHP code, the name of the field is going to be ID as well. Okay, so let's give it a label, ID, for example. Okay, and the for attributes is going to the elements of ID. Okay, so that's our first input. The next one is going to be the first name. So let's just copy and paste this. Okay, so the label is going to be first name for first name. Okay, the type is text. Okay, ID first name, placeholder first name, and the name first name. Okay, so let's copy this again. For the last name, okay, ID last name, change everything to last name. Okay, and then after that, we're gonna need the email. Okay, so the label is email, and I'm going to change everything else to email. Okay, and the type is email. Okay, and then finally we're going to have the password. Okay, so it's going to be label for password. The label is password. Okay, and the input type is password, ID password, placeholder password, and name password. Okay, and finally, let's have our submit button, which is going to be an input of type submit, and we're going to give it a name submit, and let's style it using the button and button success classes, and also let's make it bigger using the button large class. And finally, let's give it also a value saying send data. All right, so if we save this and refresh, so you can see that our form now is ready. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do, so when we open the page at the beginning, we want to connect to our database. So let's just copy the code connecting to the database. Okay. All right. So connect to database in here. Okay. All right, let's make sure that's, yeah, close. Okay, so that looks better. So we can connect to our database. We've got our form. So now what we're going to do, we are going to write some PHP code right after this header and just before the form. So our PHP code is going to get all the user inputs, okay? And then we're going to check for any errors. And if everything is fine, then we are going to execute a query, which is going to add a record to our table. All right. So as we have done before, so first of all, we're going to get all the user inputs. Okay. Okay, so we're going to define a variable ID, where we're going to store the ID inputs. Okay. So we're going to get the inputs from the super global variable post, and we're accessing the element of key ID. Okay, we're going to use the name of the inputs, it's ID. Let's just change the type to number rather than number formats, that's better. Okay, you can see that's if we have number, we'll be allowed to put only numbers there. Okay, and if you write any letters and you try to send data, we're not going to be allowed to. Okay, so the next variable is going to be first name, and we'll set it to post first name. And then last name. Okay. And then email and password. Okay. So these are the user inputs. Okay, so get user inputs, and then we are going to define all the possible or potential error messages that we are going to add to our final results message. So error messages. So the first one is going to be missing first name. Okay, So we're not gonna deal with the ID because anyway we are sure that the user is allowed to input only numbers, because the HTML5 is going to take care of that, and it's not a required field. Okay, I'm gonna see later how we're gonna deal with that. So we're gonna start with the first name. So the first error for first name is missing first name. Okay, and we can set that to a paragraph in a string. And for example, let's place everything inside the strong tags. And we can say, please enter your first name. Okay. Next one is going to be missing last name. Please enter your last name. And then missing email. Please enter your email. And also you're going to have another one for invalid email. Okay. Please enter, please enter a valid email address. And finally, for the password, we're not going to check anything about the password. We're just going to check whether we have the password or not. So missing password. Okay, please enter a password. Okay. Just one thing, we can limit the number of characters that the user is allowed to input in these fields, depending on what we have set up in our table. Okay, so if you look at our table, okay, so you can see the types in for the table fields. So let's make sure that we limit the number of characters that the user is allowed to input in all the fields. Okay, so for the first name, or the ID, so let's have a max length. Okay, let's have a max length of 4 characters, and then for the first name, it's going to be 20, and then for the last name, same, 20, and then for the email, 30, and then the password 40. Okay, if we don't do this and the user inputs anything in the field, so if they input a password more than 40 characters, for example, then we're gonna store only the first 40 characters in the table. Okay, so it's really important to control this inside the HTML form. Okay, so now we've got all our error messages. Okay, so now we are ready to start checking for any errors. Okay, so if the user submits the form, so if we have an element inside the post variable of key submit, because our submit button has got a name submit, then we're gonna do these checks. Okay, so first of all, we are going to check if we don't have a first name input. Okay, then we're going to have a variable, as we've done before, called errors, where we're going to store all the error paragraphs. So you're going to add to it missing first name. Okay. Okay. Otherwise, if we have the first name, what we're going to do, we are going to clean the first name, and we are going to let's just change this first name. I'm missing S. Okay, so first name is going to become the cleaned version of first name, and the way we get that, if you remember, so we're going to use the function filter underscore var. All right, and then it's going to take a couple of parameters. So the first parameter is the variable to clean, or the input to clean, which is first name. Okay, just bear in mind that first name is the inputs of the user. Yeah. Okay, so and the second parameter for a string is going to be filter sanitize string. Okay, filter underscore sanitize string. All right. Okay, so now we've got our first name clean. Okay, so now let's move to the next one, last name. So you're going to use more or less the same code. Okay, just going to change first name to last name, and the error to missing last name. That's it. Okay, and then we are going to check the email. Okay, it's going to be the same code more or less. So if we are missing email, then we're going to have missing email, else the email becomes the clean version of the email, and rather than filter sanitize string, we're going to be using filter sanitize email. Okay, but we're missing something here because we want also to make sure that the email is valid. Okay, so if we are missing the email, we'll add to the errors variable missing email. Otherwise, we are going to check if the email is valid or not. So first of all, we're going to clean the email, okay, and then we'll check whether it's valid or not. Okay, and the way to check if it's valid is by using filter var with filter validates email. Okay, so we're going to check if it's not valid. Okay, so if, so exclamation mark for the opposite. So we're going to check if it's not valid, and we're going to use filter underscore var, and it's going to take a couple of parameters. So the clean version of email. Okay, and the second parameter is going to be filter sanitize, filter validates email. All right. So if the email is not valid, then we are going to add to our errors variable the error message saying invalid email. Okay. And finally, the password is going to be more or less the same as the previous ones. Okay, so let's change this to password. So if we're missing the password, we're going to add to our errors variable missing password. Okay. And there is no need to filter sanitize the password. We'll see later how we're going to insert the password inside our table. Okay.